Hello, everyone. Welcome to Promethean Action's live question and answer show. Today's show is about the end of globalization, the system that has been built up after the end of World War II, after the fall of communism, after the Cold War. The system of globalization is now officially done. It's over. And Donald Trump with his entourage made it abundantly clear in Davos to the world that globalization is over and that he is now making a new offer to the world to build a new system that's based on American principles. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you very much, Paul, for the $2 super chat. I can't put it on screen anymore, but thank you so much. Everyone, as you're coming in, please let me know where you are watching from. I already see a bunch of people from Canada, Liverpool, Somerset, UK, Minnesota, Northern California.
We're getting all the occupied countries.
Yeah. Dude, Lake Havasu. I know where that is in Southern California. My brother likes to go there. Hi from South Africa. Welcome. France. Okay. Wow. We're just getting so much stuff. Okay. Please, on the way in, just drop us a like. So to start the show now, I'm just going to play some clips here of Trump. I was going to show some photos, but we already have almost 1,000 people watching. Please, everyone, just drop us a like as you come in. So I'm going to play this first clip. Some people have seen it, other people haven't. So let me just play it.
The consensus was that so-called dirty jobs and heavy industry should be sent elsewhere, that affordable energy should be replaced by the Green New Scam, and that countries could be propped up by importing new and entirely different populations from faraway lands. This was the path that sleepy Joe Biden administration and many other Western governments very foolishly followed, turning their backs on everything that makes nations rich and powerful and strong. And there's so much potential in so many nations. The result was record budget and trade deficits and a growing sovereign deficit driven by the largest wave of mass migration in human history. We've never seen anything like it. Quite frankly, many parts of our world are being destroyed before our very eyes, and the leaders don't even understand what's happening. And the ones that do understand aren't doing anything about it. Virtually all of the so-called experts predicted my plans to end this failed model would trigger a global recession and runaway inflation. But we have proven them wrong. It's actually just the opposite. In 1 year, our agenda has produced a transformation like America has not seen in over 100 years. Instead of closing down energy plants, we're opening them up. Instead of building ineffective, money-losing windmills, we're taking them down and not approving any. Instead of empowering bureaucrats, we're firing them, and they're going out and getting jobs in the private sector for 2 and 3 times what they were making in government. So they started off hating me when we fired them, and now they love me.
Okay, so right there, the first issue he's talking about, this crazy mass immigration. This is one of the hallmark policies of globalization. The idea of a one world government with one language, one border, there's only one country. Mass migration was designed to erase borders, to homogenize culture, right? Language. A nation's language, right? What is a language to a nation? A language is like the original internet. Before we had the internet, we just had spoken language. And all of a nation's ideas about its culture, its history, its internal history, is all wrapped up in its language. The idea of globalization is to homogenize all of that. A universal language, you kind of have that. English is somewhat like that on the internet, unfortunately. Okay, so I want to play another clip. Thank you, everyone. Please, again, just drop a like on the way in. I'm going to play this other important clip because this is the clip where Trump really offered and tried to make a case that the Europeans should be joining us in this process. So here, let me play this one.
Explosion of
prosperity and conclusion and progress that built the West did not come from our tax codes. It ultimately came from our very special culture. This is the precious inheritance that America and Europe have in common. We share it. We share it, but we have to keep it strong. We have to become stronger, more successful, and more prosperous than ever. We have to defend that culture and rediscover the spirit that lifted the West from the depths of the Dark Ages to the pinnacle of human achievement. We live in an incredible, changing period. It's an unbelievable time, but we have to take advantage of the time that we're in. In our hands are technologies that our ancestors could scarcely have. They couldn't have even dreamt some of the things that we see today. And so rapidly they're produced. AI, 2 years ago, nobody ever heard of the term, and now everybody's talking about it. And it can have some very good purpose. It could also have some dangerous purpose. And for that, we have to watch out. But some tremendous things are happening because of it. And we're leading by so much. We're doing so well. But opportunities that are bigger and grander than ever before in human history are right before us. It is the pioneers in this room. Many of you in this room are true pioneers. You're two truly brilliant people.
Thank you very much. And I think some of the pioneers for the future are also watching. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Before I begin, I just want to let everyone know the questions that I'm going to be taking come primarily from our newsletter subscribers. We received almost 200 questions this week. I'm very sorry if we don't get to your question. I've queued up about 40 something of them. But we do read every single question. So thank you very much. If you would like to get our free newsletter, the link is in the description. So Barbara and Susan, any thoughts before we begin the question and answer session?
Well, I want to highlight one phrase that the president used in that second clip, where he talked about how Western civilization pulled itself out of the Dark Age. And I think it's important to recognize, which I think will inform some of the immediate questions we take, that the conscious policy of the global oligarchy is to take mankind back into a dark age. Now, of course, they want to keep their modern amenities. The rest of us, not so much. But their conscious policy is a dark age. And the best antidote to the dark age is the kind of optimism embodied by the president and the economic policy that our founding fathers bequeathed to us, which we'll get into, I'm sure, in the Q&A, which gives legs to optimism because it's the basis by which mankind progresses.
Yeah, I don't want to say much more than that. I just want to, tell people we're experiencing a revolution right now. Future generations will look back on this week as a true turning point for all of mankind. The biggest problem we have here in the United States and worldwide is really communicating that in such a way that people actually grasp the nature of it. The media keeps people so blind and so far behind what is actually going on here that people end up being very, very confused. But there's nothing to be confused about. Essentially, what Trump is doing is taking the United States back to the spirit of our revolution, and most appropriately on the 250th anniversary of such. And that's where we are, and hopefully we can succeed in getting you to grasp how fundamental all of this is, based on the revolution which is actually taking place.
I couldn't agree more, Barbara. And I'd like to give a quick shout out here to our longtime supporter, Melody Hart. Thank you very much for joining us every week and keeping the chat in check. And I'd like to thank Stephen Montclair. So glad to be able to support such a good team. Keep the truth out. Thank you very much, Stephen, for joining us. I don't think I remember seeing you in the chat before. Please make sure you're getting our free newsletter, and we'll stay in contact with you. Also, we have Leslie Crazy Seattle. Oh, I'm so happy to know that there's still awesome people left in the Pacific Northwest. Very beautiful area, but man, is it... Okay, I am seriously worried about the midterms. They will cheat. You know they will. They are desperate. Okay, so any thoughts on this? Trust me, we have plenty of questions on this, but maybe as a warm-up, Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on midterms and cheating. You know, Trump is making a very big deal about this now. Election security and all the other related stuff. And now on X, Elon's always talking about this too. So what about this issue of cheating in the midterms more generally? What would you say to that?
Well, I'll start, and I always take it from the standpoint of offense. Remember, they had all their capabilities in place in 2024, and we beat them. Too big to rig, mobilizing sectors of the population, which they did not expect to come out for Donald Trump, was too much for their vote fraud machine. That being said, President Trump is waging a pretty strong defense, and I'll turn that part over to Barbara.
Sure. I mean, the deal is really, really simple. He's going to be, Susie Wiles was walking down the plane going into Davos, and she said, this is the last, she said to the press corps, this is the last big international trip you're all going to be on. Because from here on out, what's going to happen is every single week, the president's going to be going out and campaigning for the midterms. And the overall educational job we've got to do, and he's doing, is to get people out of this kind of spectator status, which all the cyber operations are designed to put you in. Comment on this, comment on that. Is he really doing this? Is he really doing that? We have a fundamental problem. It's the Congress across the board, all right? And what we've got to do is we've got to cure that, not by playing by their rules or saying, okay, normally, presidents lose the midterms, so don't raise your expectations too much or expect too much or what have you. I say to hell with that. We have to fulfill all the things that Trump has actually done, and we've got to do it by electing a Congress that's actually in line with his policies. And if we actually campaign hard on those policies, we're going to draw back in all the people who've gotten disaffected through all the various operations which have been thrown at people. The Charlie Kirk assassination, doubts about the FBI, the Epstein files. All that stuff has a certain level of truth to it, but it's not what's fundamental. What's fundamental is Trump's changing all of that. He's changing the economy and getting wrapped up in internet comments, or in operations like they're out to destroy TPUSA right now. Why are they doing that? It's because of the midterms. It's because of the capacity to actually organize youth. So people who get wrapped up is Candace Owens telling the truth about, Charlie Kirk and Israel and all that other bullshit. I mean, I'm sorry for the profanity, but that's what it is. You're getting caught up in something, which is how they're actually going to win the midterms. It's not through cheating on the vote. That will happen. It's through the capacity to get people psychologically immobilized, pessimistic, and not really going for the goal of, changing history. And that's what I think is the fundamental thing we got to worry about.
Yeah, the whole Turning Point USA thing is absolutely crazy. The amount of disgusting, vile stuff that people are saying about Erica Kirk and doing everything they can to just throw that organization in a disarray is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Another quick shout outs here. KX2Q17, Southern California is redder than people think. It's really funny. Thank you for joining us. I've spoken about this quite a few times on the show. My family lives in San Diego in the Camp Pendleton area, which is one of the best parts of San Diego. I know when I was there I was there visiting my parents before the last election in the San Diego area, and I saw so much Trump support. And I know Orange County, California was the only coastal county in Southern California that went for Trump, which is the county that's right above. So yes, I know how red California is. There's a lot of good people there. Thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you're liked and subscribed. And thank you, our real USAF veteran. Thank you for keeping us informed and involved. And thank you very much, brother, for joining us. Thank you for being here. We do 3 political updates a week. We do it on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And we do this live question and answer show on Thursday. So that's our YouTube schedule. Subscribe to our channel. I think we're about to hit 400,000 subscribers, if I'm not mistaken, on YouTube.
Pretty
Guys,
close.
if you're not subscribed, help us reach 400,000 subscribers. Hit a subscribe button.
Let's do it today.
Yeah, it could actually. Yes, actually. Yes, if you're watching and you like our shows and have been following, please subscribe and help us reach 400,000. It could happen today. That'd be super awesome. And thank you, JSF48. Thank you for joining us. We have a free newsletter. The link's in the description. Just get the free stuff. You'll get most of our communication, and we can stay in contact with you. Okay. Should I begin with the question you selected, or do you want me to tell something
because I think it continues what we've been trying to get across.
Okay. All right. So the first question here is from Lee. Thank you very much, Lee. I haven't heard any other sources, Trump, podcasters, media outlets, influencers, blaming the British imperial banking system for the evils in the world. Is there a smoking gun that they can be shown to prove the accusations that you are making, so that someone other than your group can corroborate what Trump is doing is beneficial to the world rather than something negative? Lee, I just want to say something on this. You have to be careful about this idea of like a smoking gun where there's like some magical fact that you're going to give somebody, because a lot of the people that are radical on the other side aren't even thinking rationally. And unfortunately, when somebody is in a very irrational state, coming with them with facts generally doesn't do anything. That's the definition of irrationality. So, but I want to bring this up because the first part of the question is very important. And also, what can we say to actually show people that there is this longer historical arc of influence that's going on here?
Well, look, I think we got a big boost from Ambassador Jameson Greer, the president's trade ambassador, in his Davos speech. I believe that was now 2 days ago, because I think the key conceptual problem in terms of the issue of the British is that you've been living in a world where you've been presented for most of the last century with a false set of binary choices. That is, the world is a titanic battle between communism and capitalism. Now, the reason I reference Ambassador Greer is he gave an amazing speech to Davos, which was a wonderful historical tutorial on the American system of political economy as created by Alexander Hamilton. Because what has been excised from the 20th and first part of the 21st century, that's now changing, is the fact that the actual fight in the world was the fight between the American system and the British system. It was a fight between empire, which is based on looting, based on setting up institutions like central banks or the British East India Company, or powerful monopolies and cartels, which have greater power than nations, which basically dictate to nations, which is really the relationship between the City of London and the so-called nation or government of the United Kingdom or Great Britain, but operate like a financial parasite. Now, we've all experienced the effects of that, especially over the past decades, with the intensification of these policies of looting through inflation, bailouts, free trade, and the whole panoply of what has gutted our country. But I think the key for people conceptually being able to deal with the problem and the evil of a British imperial system, and that's the important thing. It's a system. It's not a person, and it's not even a place. You can point to the City of London, which plays an important role in it, but it's a system. And the only way to truly understand its evil is to understand what has been suppressed, which is not capitalism, which is all about money. I mean, there's elements of industrial capitalism which are valid, are viable. But the American system of political economy is based on the idea that wealth comes from the human mind, and that you have to organize your society and your economy so that that can flourish. And the American system had a number of tools. Tariffs was one, protect your manufacturing. Internal improvements was another, in terms of making sure that your entrepreneurs had the infrastructure in the nation to, transport things, to have energy, and so on. And national banking, where you had a credit system which was based on ensuring credit goes to the producers, not to the parasites. So in a sense, Lee, I think your smoking gun is that. It's the understanding of the difference between the American system and the British system. And once you think through these principles, it becomes things start to fall into place a lot more quickly, without having to show an endless stream of connectos. We could show you an endless stream of connectos of how the British have subverted our country, whether it's institutions like the Federal Reserve or killing our presidents and so on, with a lot of facts. But it doesn't start there. It starts with sort of rearranging the way that you think, and then things will start to fall into place. Now, in terms of other sources, the conservative influencers and so on, I'd say there's two categories. There's people who just haven't figured out what I've just said. And I encounter this all the time when I'm being interviewed, on other outlets, and they say, wow, you're smart. Well, no, I'm not that smart. I just look at the world the way it actually is. And they start to put the pieces together. And then you have a whole lot of people out there who deliberately are pushing the imperial line and trying to keep you in a world of false binary choices. And as you go along, you'll figure out who's who. So that's how I'd answer it. Barbara may want to chime in again on the question of Donald Trump being so far ahead of any of these influencers.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take the term globalization and say to yourself, where did this come from? And Trump has opposed it ever since his 2016 campaign, and openly so. He talked about what Susan just talked about, the American system. He mentioned that name, the American system of economy, all right, which had been blanked out of our own history by our so-called university professors, for decades and decades and decades. In fact, we've been operating under the British system, not the American system. So that's what got him in so much trouble, is he basically said, I want to go back to the American system. That's tariffs, that's protectionism, that's making the producers, the laborers, the priority of your economy, not necessarily capital or money. As Abraham Lincoln used to say, labor comes before capital in the American system, okay? So what you've got now is a demonstration right in front of you. If you look at what's happened to Trump, who attacked him? It was run from London. Yeah, there were CIA people involved, there were State Department people involved, etc. But if you actually factually go back and look at who those people were, their allegiance is to this globalist system. It's not to the United States of America. All right, that's a kind of a hated idea. We're all cowboys here, bullies, all the things they call Trump. Who tried to kill him? I'll tell you right now that there may be fall guys, but it will ultimately go right back to the British Empire, because that's who's killed our presidents ever since, you start with Hamilton, who wasn't a president, but was a key founder of the American system. But, Lincoln, McKinley, Kennedy, everybody who actually talked about this thing that Donald Trump's talking about, kaboom. The other thing you might do, just to refresh yourself, the British Empire is very much, talking to people all the time about how they ended right after World War II, went out of existence, supposedly. All right. That is, a complete fallacy. In reality, they sucked us in to becoming the world's policemen. They sucked us into the idea that communism will take over the world unless you in America come and become the overall policeman for Western civilization. And that, I could go back in history with facts and prove to you, for example, that the Vietnam War was conceived by, MI6 and British intelligence. There's lots and lots and lots of information out there to show you that. But the fundamental proof, I think, is ask yourself, what do you think is the nature of mankind? Do you think mankind is endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that we're creative beings that can change the world around us? Do you actually believe that? Or do you believe that humankind is fundamentally beasts, like animals, who have to be controlled by some kind of structure above and beyond that? If you actually believe the second thing, that we're all beasts, then you actually are experiencing the worldview of the British system as opposed to the American system. So I'll leave my thoughts there.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. I'm just going to go through the super chats real quick. Thank you for being patient, everyone. Thank you very much. And finally, I can catch this live. You do much important, vital work sharing critical info. Thank you very much, Anne, for joining us today. Please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Our next live briefing is going to be on Saturday. Thank you, Lori, for joining us. We really appreciate having everyone here. We are a viewer and a reader-driven organization. We don't sell products from sponsors. We don't have sponsors. So thank you very much. We appreciate your support. Paid subscriber, saw first boot camp video. Great idea. Yes, thank you very much. We're trying to do more political work with Promethean Pact. Give us some time. We're trying to spin it up to do some really awesome stuff here and really have impact in elections here in the United States. Thank you very much, James. Love your information. Keep it going, please. We have no intention of stopping. Thank you. Thank you for joining us and for coming along with us on this ride. Please make sure you get our free newsletter. That's the best way to stay in contact with us. Thank you, Martin, for the super sticker, for the super chat. Appreciate your support. BSV, thank you for joining us every week. We appreciate our loyal supporters. You help drive, we almost have 5,000 people watching live. Please, everyone, if you're watching, please give us a quick like on the way in. Arizona report. Thank you, Promethean Action. Press on. 1776. Yes, 250th anniversary. This 4th of July is going to be lit. Much love from the UK. Yes, we have so much support from the UK and from Canada. And I wish, if I could split myself up and live in all three places. It's very hard for us to advise. I don't know much about your political system. Thank you very much for tuning in. If we can inspire somebody and people in the UK and people in Canada and Australia to take really awesome political action, then we're doing our job. Thank you very much. Greg, thank you for the super chat and for the support. Wow, I got more coming in right now. Okay, here's a question. D. Shaw, 1776. I didn't even read it yet, so we're going to read it together. How does one steer reasonable people to it's not Israel? Which honestly, with a lot of the policies and laws in states extra protecting Israel, actually against anti-Semitism, which is different for me. Thank you, y'all. So yes, this is actually a very important question. I know.
Barbara, you want to start?
Excuse me?
Yeah, the British have used the Jews as their, fall guy for centuries. I strongly suggest a book if people really want to get involved in the background of this by Richard Poe called "How the British Invented Communism and Blame the Jews." I'm going to
pull that book up here. I'm going to pull it up so people can see it because I think this is a very important book that people need to actually read. So Let me just share that real quick. Yeah.
that gives you the historical context, which Adam will pull up in a second. Then you look concretely. Is Netanyahu controlling Donald Trump in terms of the Board of Peace and the settlement of the current situation in Gaza, etc.? I think the answer to that is emphatically no on every single point. You'll see that. I see a lot of stuff in the chat just basically saying, what's up with Tony Blair? How come, Trump is allowing him to be on the Board of Peace? Well, if you really understand the history of the Middle East, you understand that the British have been prominent. They have played both sides against one another for decades. And the only way you're going to resolve it is by going outside this dynamic between Israel, the Palestinians, all of this other garbage, which was essentially just a whole great game set up around controlling in the background while the Jews and Arabs are killing one another. How do we actually get the oil, which was the British goal? How do we control the oil, which was the British goal? Right now, Donald Trump is, as you might say, trumping them on every single aspects of things. It is not the Rothschilds, all right? And people, want to talk about the Rothschilds to hope peace is over. The Rothschilds are an important component, a tool of the empire, if you will. But this is really the Queen. It is really royalty. It is really the old oligarchical families in Europe. And all of them have Anglo-Saxon names. They don't have Jewish names. Milner, Rhodes, think about the entire Round Table movement and the history of that. And you'll get into what's actually happening. And if you want to get a better sense of it, just take a look, pull up in Wikipedia if you want to use that source. Sometimes it's good for stuff. But pull up the British Commonwealth and look at the British Commonwealth, which is, how many nations are they actually prominent with in the world? And their ideological foundations, which are the most important thing. How do we teach people how to think, which is what they call soft power, essentially weds entire huge chunks of the world to this ideology I was talking about, that men and women are beasts, and we have no participation with God in the actual creation of the universe. That's the big stark difference. And that's the most important difference in terms of really thinking about this. So no, what is happening here is the wonderful Jewish tradition of culture and intellectual life has been targeted for years by, the British as the fall guy for everything that's happening. Churchill wrote as Poe's book goes through, wrote an absolutely devastating, in my view, for him, letter saying that the Jews are responsible for communism. Well, no, when you actually look at the facts, the British Empire was responsible for communism, and it was based on their idea of creating blocks in the world that they could control by deploying blocks against one another while they sit in the background and actually reap the riches. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Yeah, and I would also add, Adam, you can get that other video of the Gaza individual ready to go. But if you look at, let me start with Tony Blair. There are a whole lot of people on the Board of Peace. And I was on a show yesterday with a retired general who made a very good point in terms of Tony Blair. He said, Tony Blair is not going to be controlling anything. He's going to be advocating on behalf of the British and the City of London. So Trump, who operates from a transactional standpoint, is always going to know what they want. It doesn't mean they're going to get it. But put it more broadly in this question of the Board of Peace. Today at Davos, Trump had a beautiful signing ceremony with many of the heads of state, especially people from the Middle East, but not exclusively, participating in this. The Israelis are not really at the table at this point. The Europeans are not at the table at this point. Some of them may decide they want to get in on the action. But what Trump is doing with the Board of Peace is completely changing the basis upon which foreign policy is conducted in the world. And for the first time, the Arab nations are playing, Arab and Muslim nations are being brought in as equal partners and not just pawns on the British imperial chessboard. And, you know, for all those people who want to say that Donald Trump is controlled by the Zionists or the Jews or Bibi Netanyahu, take a look at what Trump has just created in terms of this Board of Peace and the Palestinian gentleman who's the head of it, who made a very beautiful announcement today regarding Gaza. Adam, could you play that?
Leaders, colleagues, and friends, it is an honor to be here today. I want to start by thanking President Donald J. Trump and his administration for their intensive efforts to advance peace in the whole region. I also thank Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Qatar, and Turkey as mediators, the Palestinian Authority, and members of the United Nations Security Council for welcoming the comprehensive peace plan. These efforts created the opportunity for a new future in Gaza Strip. But what will really matter is what comes next. This transition will succeed only if it delivers real, tangible improvements in daily life for Gazans. As Chief Commissioner of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, it's my responsibility to turn this moment into action, to restore order, to rebuild institutions, and to create a future for the people of Gaza defined by opportunity and dignity, under the principle of one authority, one law, and one weapon. As a first step, I am pleased to announce the Rafah crossing will open next week in both directions. For Palestinians in Gaza, Rafah is more than a gate. It is a lifeline and symbol of opportunity. Opening Rafah signals that Gaza is no longer closed to the future and to the war. I want to be clear, there is much more work ahead, and none of it is easy. The road forward will involve difficult decisions and setbacks, but this is a real step, and it marks a new direction. Now, I would like to address the people of Gaza.
So I can tell you that the people who are least happy about that in the world are sitting in London and Bibi Netanyahu.
Okay,
So-
can I ask a question here? Because somebody was spamming this in the chat, but we just had a viewer here bringing this question, which is perfectly timed, because Tony Blair is now on the Board of Peace.
Right.
Okay. Hello, I'm watching it work in between customers, and I didn't get to hear you answer about why President Trump picked Tony Blair. And you just played something from the Board of Peace. So why did Trump put Tony Blair on the Board of Peace, Barbara and Susan?
Well, you know, the sort of formulaic answer is keep your enemies close. But again, I think this question of when you look at the composition of the Board of Peace, it includes many people who, especially from the Mideast, from Arab and Muslim countries, who have not had a serious seat at the table for a long time. But why put Tony Blair on? Well, there's a lower level reason. In recent years, he has embedded himself in transactional deals with a lot of countries in the Mideast. But I think the higher reason, which I mentioned before, is Trump. I mean, let me say this. If people haven't read Trump's Art of the Deal, you should probably do that to begin to get inside the president's head. Think of what it means to have someone like Tony Blair on the board. He's going to be putting forward proposals or opposing things or whatever. That means Trump has got sitting right there with him someone who represents the old globalist imperial way of thinking things, and he is going to see directly how they are trying to maneuver in this new world that he is creating. I don't think Tony Blair is going to be playing a major role in shaping the policy of the Board of Peace. I don't know if Barbara wants to add anything.
Yeah, I think it's one of the ironies of the history of the region, so to speak. You know, the British have always played the Arab side of the war between the Jews and the Arabs in the Middle East. they have always inculcated themselves with the Arabs, going all the way back, to World War II and to the original Balfour Declaration. You remember that it was the state of Israel was created by what were called terrorist operations against the British at that point in time. So this is a historical relationship, particularly with the Gulf monarchies, which were all British protectorates. All right. So, do I think that Tony Blair is, as Susan said, going to play a major role? No, I do not. Do I think he has substantive, connections, if you will, in the area to people who are important in terms of delivering peace potentially? Yes, I do. And I think it's very possible that the way President Trump is thinking about it is, how can I use this guy? How can I actually deploy him for the benefit of everybody? Don't get me wrong. All right. I think Tony Blair is probably one of the biggest creeps of this entire century. If you look at the Iraq War and look at who sucked us into that one, there you have it right there. But the point is that I think that you've got a historical context here, which a lot of people miss, which is that all of these things are historical dynamics. And what Trump likes to do, in my view, in the art of the deal, is throw something out, put it out there, watch how the reaction happens, because all of history is not based on connectos. It's based on dynamics in terms of how people actually act. So if I want to find out what's going on with a car, very often I got to go kick the tires. All right. And I think that that's exactly what's happening with Tony Blair. But that's my hypothesis, and that I think will be borne out when you actually look at the overall picture.
That's a nice image. Tony Blair is a tire to be kicked.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan, and thank you, PGEC, for your question. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and we have a free newsletter. All right, let me clear up some of these super stickers. I just like to say thank you for everyone. Thank you, Shelly Sexton, for your donation. Again, please make sure you subscribe to our channel here. Okay, here's a quick question we can answer quickly again. What do you make of Obama visiting one Downing? This is a question we get all the time because I think he's making like repeated visits there. Barbara, Susan, any reading on this?
Just going home to mother, as they say, and that's what I think is going on there. Look, I mean, he is in the crosshairs at this point. A lot of people have lost faith in the idea that there's ever going to be a prosecution or what's going to happen. It's pretty clear that Tulsi Gabbard says he's the guy who actually set loose Russiagate, and it's pretty clear that there is a grand jury going on in Fort Pierce, Florida at this point, precisely around him being the guy who set loose Russiagate. Can he get indicted? No. But, basically, I think he's scared to death that under these circumstances, his mother is going to leave him to the dogs. And that would be my hypothesis. Again, I don't have any factual basis other than that, except that I know that he was, is, and always operated as a British agent in our presidency.
Thank you, Barbara. We have plenty more here. Thank you, Lancastrian. Thank you for your support. Please make sure you're subscribed. Jody, thank you for your super chat. We have a free newsletter, links in the description. And here we have two from Canada, our friends up north. What's next for Canada? And the person right after you did hashtag Alberta independence. Now, we're not necessarily endorsing one political movement or another per se, but can we at least think what is next for the nation of Canada? What would they have to do really to have the entire nation become more, I guess, part of the United States, maybe?
Well, I think the first question is, it'd be nice if Canada was actually a nation, as opposed to a satrap of the monarchy. One of my friends recently posted Mark Carney's swearing in ceremony where, as prime minister, where he swears allegiance to the king, right? Not to the people of Canada. So that's your first problem there in Canada. I'm sure people know, and the Super 6 sticker from Alberta indicates it. There is a petition which is circulating and being signed by thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Albertans. They're lining up, for hours on weekends to go sign this petition to put on the ballot in Alberta the question of independence for Alberta. That is obviously something which a lot of people desire. I don't think we're going to see, to the extent that you see any structural changes in Canada, I think they're going to come perhaps province by province, as this one might or might not. It might be a little premature in terms of the evolution of things. But, the question of Canada is really freeing people conceptually from the ideology of empire. And of course, it's kind of easy there. Sort of like when we were under Obama, it was obvious just how bad the globalist system was because it was sitting in our White House. And in Canada, it's pretty easy for you to see just how bad the globalist system is because it's sitting there with Mark Carney, the central banker's central banker. I think the most important thing is just a growing awareness of the alternative to British imperial thinking. There was a time when Canada, way back, as things were getting sorted out around the revolution and afterwards, could have been part of the United States. We'd probably all be a lot happier if it had been. But I think the revival of the actual principles of what differentiates a sovereign republic from an empire or an imperial, a dominion as part of an empire, which is what Canada is at this point, is really the first necessary step.
I would just add that, you're going to be facing a major economic crisis there in terms of your industry. Because what Carney did is he basically went to China and said, let's make a deal whereby I can flood Canada with your electric cars at cheap prices. That is the essence of the British system. And, for auto workers in Canada, hey, you just got royally screwed. And like Ross Perot once said of this whole system, there's a great sucking sound coming out of Canada at this point of your jobs and your livelihoods being destroyed by this guy. So whether that provides the impetus for people to actually say, let's get on top of it and let's organize something similar to what the United States did in 1776. Good time to study that because, we're going to be putting up a lot of things, both from the White House and otherwise, about how that all came about. So I think it really is, as Susan said, getting out from under a huge rock and seeing the sunlight and really among patriots for Canada, figuring out what you're going to do in that situation.
You're muted, Adam.
I did one of the, yes. Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. And thank you very much, Marianne, for the super chat. But I have plenty of more. Here's one from Jeff in Utah. The channel is growing exponentially now. Keep going. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thanks to the support of people like you joining us every week. Thank you for coming back and supporting us. Yes, we're definitely beginning the next leg of our exponential growth here. Super chat from Linda Peters. Such great minds. Thank you very much. Thank you for the support. Please make sure you're getting our free newsletter. We're really trying to do something serious in the midterm elections with our sister organization, Promethean PAC. We will keep you abreast of it. Just get our free newsletter on the Promethean Action website. And thank you for supporting us. Thank you, JSE 9191 for the super sticker. They don't show up here, unfortunately. Thank you, Pat Carey, for the support from the UK. Thank you very much from our brothers across the pond. Okay, Anthony Peterson. Greenland, what's the outcome absent a direct takeover? Canada, UAE, and Chile deal. Yes.
China deal.
I'm sorry, Canada, USA, and China deal. Dyslexia, okay. Thank you very much, Anthony. So what is going to be the outcome absent a direct takeover in Greenland?
Well, we'll have to see how this thing ultimately pans out, but it seems to me from reading everything I could about it over the past 24 hours, what is guaranteed here is whatever we want to do in terms of bases or military, habitation for defense purposes is okay forever in terms of the deal that Trump struck. However, Greenland, in terms of its citizens and its social services and the European style economy, which, Denmark wants to foot the bill for, is still going to be in place. So we're not really going to be obligated to pay for a European style economy. Rather, we're going to basically be able to build whatever capacities we need, and we're going to be able to do that forever. At least that's the outline of the deal. With respect to what is actually being talked about here, Mark Carney's idea that what we're going to do is get the middle economies to, look at the two giants, China and the United States, and basically play them off against one another, which is really what he's saying. I don't think that's even going to wash with China. All right. If you actually look at the real economic situation in the world. Obviously the problem in many respects, the problem with China is the same one that Canada has with Mark Carney. The system that he represents, basically screwed China royally for centuries. And I think they're very aware of that. And whatever temptation they might have to, say, screw you to the United States, I don't think really goes that far in what they're intending to do with somebody like Mark Carney. So that's how I'd put it down at this point.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions that came in on Greenland, so we'll kind of, take them all at this point. I mean, we don't need to take the individual questions that came in. And many of the questions came in before the agreement that Donald Trump negotiated. I mean, I would say two things. First of all, if you haven't figured out by now how Donald Trump negotiates, you're really not paying attention. I mean, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Iran, whatever it is, and obviously now with Greenland, what does Trump do? He goes in and he takes the wrecking ball to everything. I'm going to take over Greenland. We're going to bomb Iran. We're going to, do this in Venezuela and so on. Sort of like a maximalist program because he wants to see how everybody is going to react. He sorts this thing through. And so what have we now seen with Greenland? I mean, frankly, I don't think he ever intended or even said that he was going to invade Greenland. He just let everybody's hair catch on fire and claim that was the case. But he's really a master strategist. Now, I saw one passing reference right before we came on the air, and I didn't get a chance to research it thoroughly, and I will. But the reference said that one of the elements of the agreement is that it is going to nullify a lot of Denmark's veto power over what goes on in Greenland in terms of strategic policy. Because Greenland has no control over its foreign policy or defense policy. Its so-called self-determination is only in terms of its domestic economy. It has a parliament, but they have to go over to Denmark and, participate in their committees over there and so on. What Trump has always known is that it's not about Greenland. The problem was Denmark. And these new agreements, again, I just saw a passing reference, so I'm going to have to do some more research. But what it looks like what Trump has done is remove the Danish boot in terms of what Greenland will do. Now, Adam, if you could share the screen with my slideshow for a second. Okay. This is a little hard to see, but you can probably see it. This is a mountain outside, looming over Davos, where some of these lunatic elites or globalists have put a glowing sign on the mountain that says "No Kings." Well, a friend of mine, Tom Luongo, who I do a lot of interviews with and has his own X account and podcasts, he said, this is too easy. He said, you want to get, you want no kings? then why doesn't the monarchy leave Denmark alone? You know, I mean, leave Greenland alone. That's the real story about Greenland. They're still under a blasted monarchy, like our friends in Canada. So, you know, the no king sign is, you know, is a little ridiculous, because the people down there in that valley in Davos literally represent the imperial system, which still has kings strutting around the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony, for the super chat and for the question. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We have 5,000 people currently watching. If you're just tuning in and enjoying this, please drop us a like on the way in. This is a live question and answer show we do every Thursday here on YouTube. We also have 3 political updates given by these 2 ladies, one on Monday, one on Wednesday, and one on Saturday. So please give us a like here on YouTube. I believe, how close are we to 400,000? How close are we to 400,000 followers? Let me go check that real quick. Let's see. By YouTube's, we're at 397,000. So we're close to
3,000 more people.
3,000 more. Give us a quick subscribe. Okay. I just realized we went almost an hour and took only 1 question from our email list. Thank you very much. I see everyone's super chats. I have them queued up. I have plenty of questions. I will come back to them. For right now, I'm going to try and knock out a few questions from our email list here, or else we're going to be doing like 6-hour shows every week. Okay. This next one here is about Davos. Thank you, Julie, for this question. I've been reading comments about how unprecedented it is for a president to bring such a large contingent with him to Davos. After seeing the reception of Lutnick's remarks and others, I think Trump is actually playing good cop at Davos. He brought the bad cops with him. The message from Trump to the globalists: everything I stand for will live on long after I'm gone. So if you're trying to outweigh this, you can. Thank you, Julie. Barbara and Susan.
That's very perceptive, Julie. I was on an interview show yesterday with a friend of mine, and he said, yeah, I was kind of surprised at how subdued Trump was in his speech. I mean, the content wasn't subdued. I mean, he savaged, you know, Macron and Mark Carney and, you know, a bunch of other people. But he said it was almost conciliatory. And then if you turn around and you look at Lutnick, who just started right out and said, globalism is finished, it's a failure, you know, it destroys workers, we're not doing it anymore, why don't you join us? Besant was pretty brutal as well. I loved his swipe at Gavin Newsom, where he compared him to the Ken doll. Yeah, they were, you know, they were feeling their oats. But I mean, I think that's an important observation, you know, you made, that Trump is demonstrating that he's not alone, that he's got a team which is totally on board with him. You know, it's clear when you look at a younger generation like J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, he's created, you know, a bench, which too often in the past you haven't seen, people who can carry the legacy forward. But I think even more importantly, that the only way to carry these policies forward is if you have an American population which is thinking pretty close to the level of Donald Trump in terms of the nature of the crisis, but even more important, the nature of the actual solution, which is a return to the American system. It's only by putting institutions back into place that represent the American system of political economy that we can be sure that this is going to continue.
Thank you very much. Okay, next questions are going to be on NATO. Thank you, Ed. Regarding NATO, previously you said that this was a treaty and not exactly something you can walk away from without some political considerations. How exactly could the administration exit that treaty? Is it as simple as taking over Greenland and just ignoring what NATO does? Thank you, Ed, for the question. And I'll take this one together. Is securing our northern border by having a strategic presence in Greenland and Canada, questionable with their warming up to China, be a prelude to exiting NATO? Thank you, John, for the question. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that Trump is basically holding NATO's feet to the fire at this point. Think about a couple things. One, he is absolutely ruthless in terms of settling the Ukraine war. If that goes out the window, the question he's asked, ever since his first entry into politics, there's no more Soviet Union. So why the hell do we have this thing, which was based on European defense, given the Soviet Union? NATO responds by saying, well, basically what we need to do is we need to, have these alliances to keep the rules-based system going. All right. And so now we're basically focused on China, or, as Carney says, trying to break up what might be a natural alliance between Russia, China, India, etc., by bringing India over to our side. All right. That's kind of the situation as it exists now. Our biggest problem, and this is what I think is going on here, is Trump is using this board of peace concept to actually come up with the ideas which will make this type of imperial warfare, which NATO is a part of, completely obsolete. What happens if we build, the defense, the missile defense he's talking about? What happens if we can disarm nuclear missiles as they're coming our way? What happens to all of the strategic alliances in the world at that point if you can't really wage nuclear war anymore, or use that as a threat against all of humanity? You see that he's got a very broad-based kind of idea that he's working through. Again, the biggest damn obstacle in this is not anybody who's in NATO or the British Empire. It's right in our Congress, right in our Senate, and right in our House. And that's what we've got to basically deal with in terms of 2026 coming up. I just point out that the National Defense Authorization Act, which was passed by the Congress this year and funds all of the military and all of this other stuff, is still not really based on Trump's national security policy. And the reason for that is that you've got a Senate and significant portions of the House which are owned lock, stock, and barrel by the military-industrial complex, as Eisenhower basically said. So again, the issue is he's out there creating new institutions, all right? Our goal here as citizens is we got to drag these reprobate politicians right into his universe, as opposed to thinking they can exist in their crazy world.
Yeah, I'm back on the previous question where they talked about the NATO treaty. It's a treaty. Congress would have to, the Senate would have to nullify the treaty. So, but everything Trump, if you think about Trump operating on two different planes, he's operating on the plane of what can I get done as a president with the powers of the presidency, and, whatever powers have been given to him. Obviously, you see that on tariffs, and it's going to be, a hugely important decision what the Supreme Court decides to do in terms of the presidential powers in terms of tariffs. But you look at what he has accomplished on foreign policy and in other areas without the Congress. No president in my lifetime, and I'm not going to pretend I'm going to make some kind of competent historical analogy, but certainly no, in terms of any other president who's done this, but no president certainly in my lifetime has wielded the power of the presidency the way it was intended by our founding fathers for the good of the people, like Donald Trump. But then you have this whole other domain where he's going to have to get Congress to move. And that's where you all come in.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. Okay, let me just knock out a few super chats here. First, thank you very much, Artful, for your super chat. Please make sure you're subscribed to our free newsletter. Thank you, Shark615, for the support. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And I'm going to take a quick question. We also have other questions on this, so I'll take it right now. Susan and Barbara. Susan, do you think Trump will declare the Insurrection Act, that we are waiting for revolts? Will there be mass arrests? How will we root out the traitors in our government?
Well, I think the way Trump thinks about this, first of all, he was asked last week and he said, of course, I have the power to do it. And he cited all the previous times that presidents have done it in American history. But he said, but I don't think I need to at this point. And I think that's extremely important, because I think the way Trump thinks is it's the much better way to do this is to hit at these forces surgically. You have Scott Bessent and the Treasury going after, for example, the 501c3s and banking institutions in Minnesota, California, and elsewhere, you know, that are funding the fraudulent operations, all of which just, you know, map right back onto the anti-ICE riots and protests and so on. I think what this administration wants to do, number one, is figure out how can you isolate the hardcore that is carrying out these kinds of disruptions at the highest level possible, which is their money flows and the higher levels of this operation, in such a way that a lot of the street soldiers, who many of whom are cannon fodder, they're stupid, you know, suburban housewives and others who have been caught up in the ideology that somehow they're doing something good. Well, you know, I can't even get inside the minds of some of these people. But what you want to do is you want to get as many of those people to flake away, because you're making very clear you are coming down hard with indictments, with drying up the money flows, with shining a spotlight on these operations. Because ultimately, the way you would want to do this is you don't want to be in a situation where you have to arrest everybody. You want to be in a situation where most people go home because you've arrested the people at the top. And I think that's how he's thinking about these things. And I think people really just have to constantly take a beat in terms of, you know, I want to see tens of thousands of people in handcuffs. I just don't think that's the most effective way. I want most of those people to go home, you know, maybe get some mental health and become productive members of society again. I want the hardcore instigators isolated and arrested. And I think that's how they're proceeding.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Susan. I think the next set of questions we're going to take is going to take two questions on Venezuela. Okay, first one's from Tammy. Why has President Trump not recognized Machado as president of Venezuela instead of Darcy Rodriguez? Okay. And second question here is from David, who's very critical of our analysis. It does not add up. If Chavez were in league with the globalists, then why did the CIA et al. Try a coup and then finally murder him? Why did he insult Bush and company at the UN? I could go on. Your analysis does not add up. I don't disagree with Trump's actions in Venezuela, but your explanation lacks credible evidence and does not explain contradictions. Thank you, David, for your honest question. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts.
Well, if you go to the Promethean Action website, you'll see a posting there by Will Wirtz, which actually details the fact that Chavez was installed directly by the British in Venezuela, and he gives you the receipts for that. As to, you know, basically what the CIA was doing or what oil companies were doing, which is a whole other aspect of the situation, in terms of how they look at Venezuela, that I can't answer for because I can't really get into it in terms of the history. But I just would remind you that, you know, essentially under globalization, almost all of Latin America was turned in one way or another into failed narco states. In other words, they're not producing anymore anything akin to what they were doing as self-sufficient economies coming out of World War II. They basically became satraps of the British Empire in terms of the drug trade. So when Trump says he's going to go after and destroy the drug trade, he means it. It's not, I mean, I've seen all of these analyses out there of, oh, it's only cocaine. All right. It's not killing people like fentanyl is. So why are we going after the people who are doing cocaine, which of course is Colombia, etc. In our former incarnation, we basically got ourselves involved in all of the intelligence around how does the drug trade actually work. And it works fundamentally through, the logistics for finance and money laundering. And if you look at the Caribbean, where, Venezuela and the Maduro regime was operating, the primary thing you're going to find over and over and over again is a very sophisticated transport and money laundering apparatus. So Trump decided to go after Venezuela. There's all sorts of inputs into that, obviously. You got Elliott Abrams and the whole line of crap from his first term from the neocons. But I don't think it has anything to do with what he's actually talking about right now. He's talking about destroying the drug trade, both the growing and production of the drug trade, but most importantly, the money laundering and financial component of it. And if you understand how much of the present City of London, Wall Street economy actually has this dark black side to it of being kept afloat by the drug trade, literally, and the money laundering associated with that, you get a sniff of what Trump is actually talking about and saying, I'm going to take this thing out. So when I look at this, I look at, okay, what has he just hit? What tire did he just kick? And how does this all pan out in terms of the overall arrangements of the last 30 or 40 years? There's a very famous picture of the head of the New York Stock Exchange, Richard Grasso at the time, embracing the head of the FARC, which of course is the Colombian terrorist organization responsible for destroying Colombia, Peru, and other countries through the cocaine trade. But also, why is he embracing him? Because essentially that's a key monetary source for how Wall Street operates and how all intelligence operations in the world are actually financed. So he's stepped on a big beehive here, and he's kicking over the hive. And like he always does, he's getting all sorts of people coming at him because they're saying, oh, it's part of this, it's part of that, it's part of this other thing. It's not really all of that. What he's looking for is how does this monster operate and what are its real tentacles? The British, for example, were all upset that he was destroying these drug boats. Okay, they said this is not really real and we're going to withhold intelligence because we think it's a violation of international law. BS, all right? What was actually going on there is that they had these agreements where they target one part of the drug trade that they didn't control in order to exercise control of the drug trade that they actually wanted to prosper. This is a whole economy, which people have to grasp, which is behind this killer assault of poisoning the population of the United States. So none of the traditional analyses that you get about this actually hold. You have people who are what I call the third worldist camp who say, oh my God, Trump is violating sovereignty. I'm sitting on top of a situation in which this corporation, the worldwide drug trade, is destroying my population if I'm president of the United States. And I'm going to use every single tool I have to wage a war against these guys, a significant part of which, to send a warning to everybody else, has to be kinetic. As Trump likes to do it, I'm a madman. Imagine what could happen to you if you basically keep doing this crap. And fentanyl deaths are way down at this point. So if you're looking at the corollary, well, it's really cocaine in Colombia and it's not fentanyl. that's not really true, number one. But second, the thing that is being targeted is the administrative apparatus, the money laundering apparatus of the international drug trade.
Yeah, and I'll take up the Delcy Rodriguez question. Trump answered that very directly I can't remember if he was on the White House lawn or in the Oval. But he said to the reporter who brought up, why didn't you support Machado? Why are you supporting Delcy Rodriguez? He said, do you remember that thing called Iraq, where we brought down a dictator and then we cleaned out the government? We fired everybody. And what happened? ISIS came in and took over. Now, I'll put it in slightly more precise terms. That's exactly how the British operate. They'll change, they'll change their chess, they'll go from a white pawn to a black pawn, but it's still their pawn. And that's certainly what happened in Iraq. That's what could happen in Iran. It's obviously a very complicated, delicate situation. But what Trump is not doing is opening up the door to chaos in an area where the globalists, and in particular the British, can move in and put one of their kinds of pawns in. So instead, he took out Maduro and is working with the existing structure in Venezuela to make sure it doesn't descend into chaos. And I'm not passing judgment on Machado one way or another. I mean, you certainly have to ask the question of why she got the Nobel Peace Prize if you look at the list of horrible people who get the Nobel Peace Prize every year, not the least of which is Barack Obama. And you sort of have to say, all right, what game are the globalists playing with this? Again, but, Trump met with her in the White House last week. He said he got to know her. She's a very fine person. And perhaps there's a role for her in Venezuela. But he is not going to fall for the standard regime change operation, which is to get rid of the leader of a country who may be good, bad, or whatever, and create the conditions where the globalists can come in and make it even worse.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. As you realize, that's the article. It's relatively short, but it has the most important connections that we know of between Chavez and his connections to the British in the 90s. So you can check out that article. All right, the next.
Whoops.
Excuse me. Whoops, I pressed the wrong button. The next set of questions here are going to be on Iran. Yes. So here we go. Three questions on Iran. First is from Janet. Why didn't Trump help the protesters in Iran when there were so many slaughtered? Why did President Trump abandon the Kurds and allowed former al-Qaeda commander, now presented as the new president of Syria, to move into their territory and release some of the most brutal ISIS terrorists who have ever been held in maximum security prisons? Yes, I think the situation in Iran and Afghanistan is deteriorating quite rapidly again. MC, does this mean President Trump should not attack Iran? And he put a link there, which I'm not going to put up. I did look at it. But what's issue? Should President Trump not attack Iran? Donald Trump's approach to Iran aligns with Israel, not for peace. How does this help the effort to get rid of British control of our lives? Thank you, Jim, for your question. And finally, whoops, that's the next set. So I'm sorry, these are the three questions. Why didn't President Trump help Iran? Should he or not attack Iran? And this person is saying that supposedly President Trump's approach aligns with Israel and not for peace. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on how President Trump is handling the situation, the absolutely revolutionary situation in Iran?
Well, I think the fact that he didn't attack Iran, basically shows you that Israel is not, controlling Trump on this particular issue. Will he in the future potentially, do some kind of mop-up operation in terms of Iran? I think looking at the whole way this evolved over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks, he doesn't think that attacking Iran at this point is going to particularly help the revolutionary forces in Iran. In fact, he, I think, believes that that will tend to create a nationalist response among the people who are actually revolting. With the idea of, am I basically substituting a new form of control for the one I'm trying to get rid of? I think he is doing other things other than kinetic military attacks. He's moved ships into the area. It does appear that a lot of the killing has completely died down. The difficulty right now is, if you're looking at it from this, he does not want regime change, which is what Israel is actually advocating. He doesn't want to put the Shah's, son back into some kind of office there, because he's really looking for what can emerge from this population that actually has some staying power, which has been the problem all along with these internal revolts in Iran as they've taken place. They've revolted and revolted and revolted, and then come back to actually being controlled by the mullahs throughout. So I just think that the strategic picture of the entire Middle East is being changed and altered. That's the thing that people have to keep in mind. It's no longer, what about Iran and Israel? And that's the fundamental dynamic that everybody's dealing with. The Saudis, who are the historic enemy, if you will, of Iran in the region, counsel the president not to attack, for the very reason that they believe that essentially it would have backfired from the standpoint of saving more lives and creating the basis for some type of actual change to take place. I think his overall approach in the Board of Peace is to get the ball rolling on prosperity, where everybody in Iran is looking at the rest of the Middle East, which had been in the same kind of chaos they've been in since 1979, and said to themselves, hey, we could be on board with this. And I think there are forces in Iran who you see coming forward. Again, Trump handles things dynamically. He basically looks at, okay, I'm going to kick over the beehive. I'm going to look at who lands where. That gives me a map of where things actually are going. And from that map, I can determine what course of action I take next. Is it going to help? He clearly came to a conclusion, at least at this point, that military intervention was not going to help. That doesn't mean, I don't think that means he isn't doing many other things. I think that there's back channels to the Russians. I think that there's back channels to all sorts of people who are actually being talked to and lined up, and we'll have to see what happens. It's very clear that the neocons and Netanyahu want, an actual U.S. intervention in Iran. I think he's resisting that at this point. And we'll just have to wait and see. A lot of this is opaque to us because we don't see the back channels. We don't see what's actually being talked through with various people who have some influence on the actual situation. With respect to Syria, is a mess. And, we'll just have to see how that stabilizes itself out after years of interventions by the British and by the former administration of the United States. It's emblematic to me with respect to what we're talking about in terms of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. There's a very famous WikiLeaks email from Jake Sullivan to Hillary Clinton, essentially saying, reminder, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. So, that should give you some insight into what's behind the headlines in terms of years and years and years of intelligence operations.
Yeah, I just add one other thing, in terms of a useful framework to think about this. Again, it comes back to this question of how the British play the pawns on the chessboard, and sometimes it's the black pawn and sometimes it's the white pawn, and they could care less as long as they're controlling the chessboard. And I think what you see Trump doing, and I think you see it in Syria, I think you see it in Venezuela, is he's taking people, who are not going to win the good housekeeping seal of approval, in terms of humanitarian leaders or something. But he's taking people who have been pawns on the British chessboard and taking them off the chessboard so that the British are not the ones deploying them. And I think that's what he's doing. And I think out of that, he hopes you're going to see an evolution, whether it's in Iran, Venezuela, Syria's perhaps a little more sticky in terms of this. But he wants to create the conditions where you have an evolution from within the country in this new geometry that he's creating, where someone who is actually supported by the population, who is more in keeping with our view of how nations should be run, emerged to take over. But he is, so I think that's the framework. Think of many of these is, he's taking somebody. Another example is Erdogan, who's not a great person, by all means, in terms of the way he runs Turkey, clamps down on opposition, greater Turkey, all sorts of things. But again, question, you're not going to get rid of Erdogan tomorrow. So is Erdogan going to be on the British chessboard, or are you at least knocking him off the chessboard where he's at least in some kind of transactional relationship with you?
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. I'd like to just do some quick housekeeping here. If you're just tuning in, this is Promethean Action's live question and answer show. We do this show every Thursday. We have 3 political briefings a week. We also have a free newsletter. If you've been watching our channel here on YouTube for a while, I urge you to get our free newsletter. The link is in the description. You could search the web for Promethean Action. We're trying to do a lot leading into the 2026 midterms. We want to be able to stay in contact with everyone, and email is still the best way to do that for us. So please stay in contact with us through our email list. Okay, so next set of questions is going to be on the midterms and organizing. And guys, I have all of your super chats here, but I'm going to take this person's because I think this is a good way to lead into it. So Salah, thank you very much. I want to educate my friends and family. What is a single homework at Promethean Action as a primer for the British Empire? Well, I'm going to answer this one here. So if you come to our website, Promethean Action, just do a search for Promethean Action. We have very good SEO. We're going to show up on the top of the search. Promethean Action. We have the spot on here on the website called the toolkit. It's right up the top here in the menu. And if you scroll down, you'll see this pamphlet here. It's the a police dossier. It's the British who murder our presidents. If you come to here and get a copy, I would say this is probably your best introduction to begin to educate. I think this is a good place to start.
And Adam, while you're there, scroll down to the bottom because there was another
Oh,
question.
yes, you're right.
There was another question that came in terms of how can I begin to educate myself more deeply? And we have a couple, I call them house historians and house economists. Brian Lance has written a number of books on the physical economy. And as you can see there, Robert Ingram has written, anybody want to count? Is that a dozen books? Might be a dozen books on various aspects of, in particular, American history and the fight between empire and republic. I would recommend as the most important first places to start is the Anglo-Dutch Empire. Is that the name of it on his? I can't see. I can't remember. His more broad historical sweep in terms of the origin of empire. And then I think in terms of the best dive into the situation in the United States is his book on national banking. That's if I were starting, that's where I would start.
So yes, please come to our website, hit the toolkit and the menu, come to the Promethean Action Toolkit, and on this page, you will find resources to help get yourself oriented. Thank you very much for the super chat. Please make sure you're subscribed. I think We're getting close to hitting 400,000 subscribers on YouTube, which would be really awesome. Thank you everyone for your support. Okay, let me go to the next question here. 13, yes. Okay. How can conservatives convince the average uninformed voter to disregard the Democratic Party's lies and to come out and vote for Republicans in the midterm? Thank you very much, John. I'm gonna take a few of these together here that are very similar. Thank you. And then this next one's from Jim. What does the weak GOP need to do to get this feeble-minded U.S. voters to support and vote red in the midterms? Do you see the GOP making real progress to get this done? No, I don't know about the GOP. Man, that's going to be a tough one. Thank you, Jim. This next one's from David. How can we identify the Republican rhinos in Congress and work to replace them with true conservatives? Thank you, David. I would be very interested in knowing who these 81 congressional Republicans are and knowing how to contact them. I hope your site will publish these names. Thank you, Terry. And the last one in the set here. How do we know who the MAGA candidates are in the midterms? Is there a list? I think Promethean PAC needs to produce that. How can I help support Trump? Thank you very much, Kate. So these are the questions we have on people really starting to realize, like, hey, are the Republican parties, are we actually going to win the midterms?
Well, I'll start, and Barbara and I are both putting our Promethean PAC hats on at this point, because in addition to Promethean Action, which is our policy arm, we have a political action committee, which is created precisely to intervene into these elections. I'm going to take it from the standpoint of the conceptual challenge, especially starting with this broader question of convincing the average uninformed voter. I think President Trump said it very clearly when he addressed the Republican conference maybe a week and a half ago, Republican congressmen who were gathered. He said, "Why aren't you out there campaigning on what I've done?" Because that's how you're going to do this. I don't think it's a question of beating your head up against disregarding the Democratic, all the Democratic Party's lies. None of us are going to live long enough to counter each one of the Democratic Party's lies. Much more important is to get them out of the world that they're in. And I always go back to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who in an interview said, I thought, something very insightful. He said, the Democratic Party's strategy is to compensate the loser. In other words, the Democratic Party's lies are in a world in which you're just a little person with no power. You're basically screwed. And what we're going to do is we're going to throw some money at you to keep you pacified. And what Bessent said is, I don't think that you're losers, namely working people and, people in the lower incomes. He said, I think it's a system which has worked against you, and we are changing the system. And I think that's where the question of organizing starts. That is, you've got to get people to realize it's an entire system. It's not a series of policies. It's not, boys and girls bathroom and get them out of women's sports and so on. These are all important things. It's not even things like immigration as a thing in and of itself. It is a system which has made the majority of the American population losers. Now, part of the American population has revolted against that and said, I don't want to be a loser, and that's why I'm in MAGA, because I want to make the United States great again. Well, those probably are the people who are listening to us right now. But this question says, what about the other people who still think of themselves as losers? Because that's really what you're doing. And you have to begin to demonstrate to them that you can actually be a winner. And I think the president, again, when he was in the White House the other day, on the anniversary of his inauguration, going through his accomplishments in the first year, he kept saying, maybe I need better PR, because I don't think I'm getting that across clearly enough what we're doing. Well, kind of that's where we come in. Adam, could you share the screen? I mean, we're committed to providing people with, simple visual examples of what it is that Trump has accomplished, which purpose is to get people out of the loser mentality, and thinking as somebody who actually has power, potentially has the ability to create a better life for themselves and their children and their families. So this is just one graphic we've used quite a bit. This is just November. You add that up, that's over 400 facilities where ground was broken in November. We're waiting for the December figures. It's going to be bigger. And the next figures are going to be even bigger and bigger. And some people are already feeling the immediate impact of this. There's a boom in construction workers. Construction wages have gone up. Mining wages have gone up. Manufacturing wages have gone up. Here in Detroit, the famous Rouge plant, which is called Dearborn Truck, it's now running 24/6, not 7. It's running 3 shifts a day, 6 days a week. Hasn't done that forever. So there's a lot of people out there where you don't have to go convince them of anything. They're once again participating in a booming economy, or an economy which is beginning to boom. Because I'm not going to deny the fact that there's still whole layers of the population, especially people caught in, service sector jobs, administrative jobs, and so on, where they're not necessarily feeling this yet. But as Trump kept saying, I fired a bunch of bureaucrats, and at first they were mad at me, and then they went out and they got good jobs, and now they're happy because they're making more money. The faster that this actually begins to be felt within the population, the better. Then I'm going to share one other thing. Which way did I go in terms of this? There we go. Promethean PAC is conducting every 2 weeks a midterm boot camp to answer some of the questions that were just posed in terms of how do we effectively intervene into the midterm elections with these kinds of ideas. And this last Friday, we had a really lively discussion. It was our first one for 2026. We had 2 candidates from Texas, a young gentleman in his 20s running for Congress in the Houston area, and another woman running for state rep. And they have very successfully taken up the challenge of translating Trump's new economy into their campaigning, especially around the question of training young people with the kind of skilled jobs that can give them a real future. And Helen Zhao, who was the state rep candidate, she used one example. She said, I knocked on one person's door. I met a 23-year-old who went through one of these apprenticeship programs, has got a good job. I can't remember if it was an electrician or whatever it was. He's already bought a house at the age of 23 or 24 because he has a good paying job. That's basically how you're going to counteract this. Now, people who want to be involved in the boot camp will have more of a way you can directly sign up as we move along a little bit. But for now, if you want to be involved in the boot camp, our next one will be on the 30th of January. Make sure you're signed up at Promethean Action at the moment. We'll make this a little simpler down the road. But make sure right now you're signed up at Promethean Action and just send us a message that says boot camp. And we'll make sure you have all the information you need. So I'll leave my remarks there. Barbara probably wants to be a little more specific in terms of targeting who's who in the Congress.
Yeah, we're going to be doing much more on that on Promethean PAC. That is really very concretely breaking down the races as they currently stand. I'm hoping to do an update on that about every 2 weeks coming up. It's going to shift and change. But Susan has really gone over the fundamental thing. What you can do to educate yourself right now is go to the White House website and go to Donald Trump's executive orders. Go through them and learn them and go with them like the back of your hand, all right? Most people have no idea what he has actually put into motion here on energy, on space travel, on all of these things which can actually inspire the minds of people, but are outside the kind of geometry that the media has you operating in, i.e., you know, so-and-so said, did such and such to so-and-so, you should be enraged and freak out and basically post about it and get involved in this or that camp, etc. These are transformative economic programs. And if you actually educate yourself in it, you're going to be able to judge who's who and what's what in the midterms, because you're going to be able to ask your, you're going to be able to ask your Republican congressmen or senators, where do you stand on this executive order? What are you doing to actually make it law? If you disagree with it, what's your disagreement? All right, that's the kind of debate we actually need to have with these guys at this point across the board, because what you're going to find is many of them presently are just completely miseducated in terms of economics, in terms of all the things which we should be expecting in terms of planting the future seeds for the next generation, which is how Trump is looking at it. He's not looking at it as to just right now, but how do I create an economy which is going to make sense for my children's children? And that's the challenge we all have in terms of how we think about all of this. And I guarantee you, if you just do that one disciplined exercise, you're going to know more about how to organize your congressman or senator than they themselves even recognize, because most of them are not familiar with Trump's executive orders. It's just, they don't know what his program is. I think you might find that odd that you would think that it was the Republican Party, but believe me, it is true. All right. And you can basically, put your stamp on these guys by actually doing that study for yourself, doing your homework, and then, over and over and over again, where do you stand on this? Who's supporting you, by the way, in your opposition to this? And you begin to get a whole map. So I'm suggesting that's a type, we're going to be doing as much as we can on this. But, basically it requires people out there to get very active in terms of exactly the things that Trump is talking about, and getting very active in terms of becoming an army to actually get this thing implemented. People worry all the time, and it's a good worry. It's a real question at this time in our history. What if they knock off Trump? Well, the answer to that, the thing that will keep them from succeeding in doing that, or even constantly entertaining the idea, is if there's an army out there composed of you guys who say, okay, next man up. I'm going to actually try and master all this stuff, just like, our revolutionary forefathers did when they went off to fight the American Revolution.
Adam, I want to just underscore what Barbara said. Share the screen, please. This is from the White House website. Now, admittedly, there's a lot of stuff on there, and you got to sort yourself through it. And perhaps what we can do with Promethean PAC is distill some of the better resources from the White House website and put them in one place for you. But this is just an example of the kind of material that the administration is providing you. This is real wage growth, in factory workers, construction, and look at mining there on the right. Over just the first year of Donald Trump. So there's tons of material like this in there. They did a whole review, going into the anniversary of the inauguration. So just poke your way through the White House website, find the things that kind of strike you in terms of, gee, that would make sense when I'm talking to my next door neighbor who's got this problem. He probably has no idea that this is happening. Start keeping up with the president. I wouldn't worry about the Republican Party. I'm active in it in Michigan. I'm one of the statewide officers. It has a role to play, but it's not a leadership role in this. Donald Trump is light years ahead of the RNC, the political party apparatus in the states, and so on. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are indifferent. It's really not where the battle is being fought. It's Trump and his policies. So catch up with Donald Trump, and we'll as Barbara said, we'll be in a lot better place.
Thank you, everyone. Let me do a quick recap here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you've been watching our channel for a while, please give us a subscribe. We're almost at 400,000 subscribers here on YouTube. There's so many questions are coming into the chat. I'm still getting questions emailed to me right now. Okay, I have so many super chats here with questions in them, and I have another 40 that I haven't even asked yet. So I just want to say, don't think that we're ignoring you or that I'm targeting you or something. We just have so much. We have so much stuff, and there's only so many things we can take. So please
Adam,
don't feel bad.
can I make a public service announcement
Sure,
at this
please.
point? If you're sending us a question to be asked on air, please ask only one question. I mean, we can't really take it when you ask 4 questions on 4 different topics in a row. So, I mean, we'll probably get to many of these, your questions, just because these are on people's minds, but just my public service announcement.
I want to give a quick shout out to Kevin. Thank you very much for your generous super chat. We really appreciate it. Make sure you're on our email list. Hopefully you already are. The link is in the description. We have a free email list. Let us stay in contact with you. And we're going to do some great things together. So thank you very much. And the next set of questions is going to be on this issue. So I'm taking this one here too. Thank you, Fat Hulk Ride e-bike. The most important thing is securing the election. If we get voter ID and get rid of paper ballots, this gets easier. Absolutely. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read a few more questions along with this one here. And here we go. Why would the Republican senators vote against the SAVE Act? Are they receiving kickbacks for voting no, or were they line items that we, the GOP, would not agree with? Thank you, Bridget, for your question. Why hasn't Congress passed voter ID voting? Well, because it's Congress. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your question. How can we help ensure that the midterm voting is not fraudulent? Thank you, John, for your question. You can see this is on everyone's mind. And the last one here. Thank you, Alice. While Trump is doing great things, my concern is that the voting machines for the midterms. What is being done to ensure that there will be no cheating? If the midterms are lost, we are doomed. Also, I am very concerned about the government intrusion in our freedoms, such as the flock cameras and ring cameras in every state, watching our every move and creating social credit scores against us. Okay, we can't see them, but they are there and working. What is being done to stop this pre-crime thought police? Thank you, Alice, for your question and comment. So generally, vote stealing, the election, voter ID, paper ballots. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts?
Again, it comes back to, first of all, swamping, making it too big to rig. All right. And you know, you got to understand that the way this works is on margins, small margins. You can't basically just, you know, take an election and say, okay, I'm going to switch it up 100%. You're going to get caught if you do that. It's pretty obvious. So the way this works is by very close elections being able to manipulate small numbers of voters. What happened in 2024 is the effort to create the fraud didn't go away. It was all there. But the people mobilized for Donald Trump and created margins which were so big that the cheating lost its efficacy. So yes, all of the things which people are saying are important in terms of paper ballots, the SAVE Act. You know, there's a lot of, you know, what I call, people probably aren't familiar with it, but, you know, it's the question of the enemy of the, you know, the enemy of the good is the perfect. You know, you got situations out there where, you know, what people are asking for, you know, simply the Congress says, well, the states are supposed to control under our Constitution the electoral process. So if we as Republicans now, this is their argument, go ahead and actually say we're going to nationalize elections, what keeps the Democrats from doing that should they come into office? Now, the obvious answer to that is we're going to destroy the Democratic Party so they're no longer a threat, all right? But that is something other than a legalistic answer. That's a political answer in the sense that we're mobilizing the population on such a level that all of the fraud stuff just does not work. Now, there's some suggestions which actually are out there, which says that Tulsi Gabbard is going to be releasing certain declassified documents about the 2020 election. And I have a certain amount of faith that that's all being looked at and investigated at this point in time. And, I read somewhere, and I haven't had time to research it, is that Dominion was actually apparently bought out by, Republican operatives at this point. That's a smart way of doing it, faster than legislation, most certainly. Again, we come back to all of these things are important and significant, and we should secure them. But the way this thing is going to be won is exactly the way we won it in November of 2024. That is by a vast mobilization of the population so that none of the fraud methods actually work.
Yeah, and I mean, some of this, things like the SAVE Act, voter ID, only Americans voting, all of those things, to the extent that Congress can play a role in those things, and the SAVE Act is out there to be passed, we should be pounding our congressmen and our senators on this. But I think Barbara's point is still the most important one, because you have to ask yourself, what can we control? Sometimes you can't control what's going on in a blue state at this moment, because it's still blue. You're going to have to win an election to turn it red, right? Well, how do you win that election if they control, for example, the voting apparatus? Too big to rig. Just create the kind of tsunami of optimism and support where, like here in Wayne County, everyone knows Detroit, infamous in terms of the 2020 election, pizza boxes on the windows, when they brought in the absentee ballots and so on. Yet Donald Trump won Michigan in 2024 because we increased the margin of voters in Wayne County. We didn't win it, but we increased the margin of voters in Wayne County for Trump so much that their vote fraud apparatus was going to fall short, and they threw in the towel. And remember, they called Michigan at 11 o'clock on, election night in 2024, not 4 days later, like in 2020.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. Okay.
I think we should, I forgot to do one more advertisement here, which also gets back to, so we could share the screen, which gets back to our organizing the population around Trump's policies. This is the first side of a half-page flyer that we have, which you can order on the Promethean Pack website. You can download a black and white version, or you can order the nice color version. This is an important tool to use in terms of showing your friends and neighbors Donald Trump's Republican Party is not your grandfather's Oldsmobile. It's not the party of Wall Street. It's not the party of war. It's the party of workers. We're going to be producing new half-page flyers like this, which sort of say, okay, this was Trump's intention, because we put this out in August. Here's what he's already done, and take some of that very useful material we showed you earlier in terms of what he's already unleashed to make this the party of working people and producers and average Americans. But I wanted to make clear to people that this is available right now, and Adam has put the link on the website.
So here's a copy of it. It's about half the size of a regular piece of paper. We have a black and white version too that you can print up on your printer at home. But if you want nice color copies, you can follow the link there. QR code is up top. They're great conversation starters when you want to try and break the ice and speak to somebody. So check out the link or the QR code. Thank you very much, Susan. All right, next question is going to be, on the current state of MAGA. So thank you very much, Hemp House, for your question here. Thank you. You have turned 50 years of understanding the USA on its head. Question: how do you see the present state of MAGA? Is the movement as split over his Epstein opaqueness and sprawling aggression, Gaza, Iran, Venezuela, as we are being told, quote, by MAGA insiders? Is Trump at real risk of losing his support base if the average Joe cannot see or understand the hidden tactics or objectives? Thank you very much for your observation and question. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts.
Well, welcome to the battle for the midterms. Basically, what is being said right now is what I call in a traditional political parlance, an effort to depress the base, an effort to make you pessimistic, an effort to make you say, I give up, these guys are all powerful, an effort to say maybe Trump was compromised by Epstein, and that's what this is about. These are all operations, and I include Epstein in that. All right. I mean, I looked at this thing. I think that Mike Benz has the best explication of who this guy was and what his operations were, and why, in many respects, the whole way this went out there is a fraud, and it's designed to actually cover up the very real role he played, not for the Israelis, not for the Mossad, but for multiple intelligence agencies. He was a premier mover of money, dirty money. He's a premier bagman, a premier money launderer. You don't, in that circuit, blackmail people simply because that you lose your usefulness. If I'm trying to deal with the elites and making money off of their private banking, and I'm giving them private banking services, and somebody says, oh, this guy tried to blackmail me, where's my business? How does it operate? Where does it go? Similarly with all of the victims, why doesn't it remind you of the entire Me Too cancel culture? The original Epstein case resulted in a victims compensation fund, the one down in Florida that everybody says was a gigantic cover-up. The one down in Florida created this multi-million-dollar fund for the victims, and all they had to say was, I was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, and they cashed in. Now, in a traditional legal context, you'd actually say, does that make their testimony really reliable? Or what's going on here? So the whole way this was done, I mean, Donald Trump turned Jeffrey Epstein in, but he also knew how this thing, given that he was essentially held hostage by this crazy sexual harassment nonsense for his entire first term, the whole Me Too movement for his entire first term, the whole crazy lady who said she got raped in the middle of Bloomingdale's department store, which is batshit nuts. You can basically understand Trump's reaction to all of this. And he knew what Jeffrey was and what he wasn't. What the fraud is in this, and I lay it out because I think it's important to know, is you're never going to get to his actual role because foreign intelligence operations are classified up the wazoo. People come back and say, well, they shouldn't be classified because 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 makes it, so you can't classify stuff simply because it's embarrassing. That's not what's operating here. What's operating here is the highest level of classification involving our allies and what Epstein was actually doing. But, the point is that everybody has been hooked on this thing and think that that's what defines reality. That's what defines Trump. He's defined by what his relationship to Epstein was and whether he's covering it up. And, what people don't recognize is who's actually pushing this. Is it the Democrats by any chance? Yeah, it is. And what does that kind of tell you about how all of these things actually operate? With respect to I mean, we've spent a lot of time today talking about these various interventions with respect to Gaza, Iran, and Venezuela. And, you know, MAGA insiders, if you're referring to Tucker Carlson and that entire group, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't think she's a MAGA insider. I'll be blunt here. I think she's a fraud. And essentially what actually is going on is an effort by any means to suck you into kind of profile belief structures. If you're MAGA in the sense that you think MAGA is we're going to become an isolationist nation in a world which, if we do so, we kill ourselves, given the present structure of political reality. No, Trump is not an isolationist, and he is dealing in the world from the standpoint of what will benefit Americans and what I'm doing abroad. What's the American interest in any of this? Well, if you bring peace to the Middle East, you end, 100 years of destabilizations based on energy and oil. Which is obviously Gaza and Iran. If you wipe out the drug trade, you end the murder of our citizens and the degradation of our culture. And this is what various people don't realize because they stick themselves in these stances, like Tucker has stuck himself in, you promised that you'd never get involved in the affairs of other nations. What are you doing? Why are you getting involved? Well, he didn't promise that. He promised only that whatever he did would have a clear mission orientation, it would have a limit, and it would be defined by whether it was in the interests of the United States or not. And that's the judgment call which he's making every day as president of the United States. And what ticks me off about the so-called MAGA influencers is they refuse to put themselves on that stage of history and examine the consequences of what it is they're actually advocating in other than completely emotional terms, not in terms of what is really to the future benefit of our nation. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I'll just ask people to sort of as a summing up, because I know we're at the top of the hour, as they say. Think about MAGA. Make America great again. All right. So when you're complaining about something that Trump is or isn't doing, you have to hold it up against that standard. Where does it fit in the policy fights to make America great again? Well, I would submit that what he's doing economically is at the very top of that metric of making America great again. The fact that he's taking on the big institutional investors and telling them you can't buy single family homes. The fact that he's taking on the pharmaceutical companies and saying, you've got to lower your prices. The fact that he's forcing them to lower their prices. The fact that he's taking on the health insurance companies saying, I want to take the money away from you and give it to the American people. The factory starts, the $20 trillion of investment that's coming into the United States because of his deals. So, if you want to think about what will make America great again, that is what is making America great again. Now you take Epstein and you say, well, where does that fit in the question of making America great again? Well, you can make a kind of knee bone connected to the thigh bone. These are the powerful people. They've imposed the bad agendas and we want them to go to jail, because they've imposed the bad agenda. Well, I think Trump is actually taking it on a little bit more directly. He's taking down their system. So if you want to take down their system and make America great again, then pay attention to what Donald Trump is doing. And if the MAGA base is talking about that, we'll be just fine. If the MAGA base is talking about the issues that the enemy wants you completely fixated on, well, then we will have a problem.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Final thoughts from me before we end today's show. I think if people really want to throw down for the midterm election, you have to bring people with you to vote. You have to reach into your families, that uncle, that cousin that likes Trump, but when the day comes, it just doesn't vote. There's a lot of people like that in the conservative movement. And if all of us, if just a small, if like 10% of MAGA would just bring 1, 2, 3 people with them to the polls, that would bring such a massive landslide to the election. That's what we need to do. You need to mobilize your friends and family, your personal networks, dig your coworkers. You have a close coworker you work with, you know, he follows Trump, but the day of the election, you ask him, he's like, oh, I didn't have time. Sorry, I didn't have time to go vote today. That kind of stuff. You need to hold those people's feet to the fire and bring them to the polls. On the super stickers, guys, I still have like 30 super stickers that I didn't show. Thank you so much for the donations, everyone. We're going to be back next week at the same time. If you're not yet already, please get our free email newsletter. We'll send you updates. I'll send you the links so you can send us in your questions, and you'll be able to follow what we're doing as we move closer towards the midterm elections, which is, we're almost in February. It's literally right around the corner, guys.
Yep.
So thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.